The baby monitor was supposed to be for our future nursery. Instead, it recorded my husband and his mother planning how to divorce me the moment I inherited my grandmother's estate. I was 6 weeks pregnant with the grandson they've been begging for. My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm about to tell you how I took everything from the two people who tried to take everything from me. It was a Tuesday morning in our townhouse in San Francisco when I found out I was pregnant. The 2 pink lines appeared so fast I had to blink to make sure I wasn't seeing things. After 3 years of trying, 3 rounds of IVF, thousands of dollars, and more tears than I could count, it had finally happened naturally. Just like that. 2 pink lines and my whole world shifted. I sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes just staring at that test, my hand pressed against my still flat stomach, tears streaming down my face. Not sad tears, happy tears. The kind of tears that come from a dream, finally coming true. I couldn't wait to tell Marcus. My husband. The man I'd been with since college. The man who'd held me through every negative test, every failed IVF cycle, every month when my period came and crushed our hopes once again. Marcus worked from home most days as a financial consultant. His home office was in the converted garage, soundproofed and private, so he could take client calls without disruption. I could hear him in there now, his voice muffled through the walls. Probably on a conference call. I decided to wait until he was done, to plan something special. Maybe I'd cook his favorite meal, light some candles, present him with the test in a cute way. Before I continue, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you. And if this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. While Marcus finished his call, I went to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients for beef Wellington, his absolute favorite dish. The one I only made for special occasions because it took hours and was incredibly complicated. But this was the most special occasion of all. We were finally going to be parents. I was dicing mushrooms when I heard Marcus's office door open. But instead of coming to find me, I heard the front door open and close. I wiped my hands and walked to the window. Marcus was walking down the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, heading toward his car. That was odd. He rarely left during work hours. Something made me pause. Some instinct I can't quite explain. Maybe it was the way he'd left so quickly without saying goodbye. Maybe it was the tension I'd sensed in his voice through the walls. Or maybe it was just pregnant woman intuition. Whatever it was, I found myself walking toward his office. The door was still cracked open. His computer was on, screensaver bouncing around. His coffee mug sat half full on the desk, still steaming. And there, on the bookshelf behind his desk, was the baby monitor receiver I'd bought 3 weeks ago. I'd purchased a fancy video baby monitor system. The kind with crystal clear audio and night vision. I'd been so excited about it that I'd opened it immediately and set up the camera unit in what would eventually be the nursery, just to test it out. The receiver had been sitting on Marcus's bookshelf ever since, something I'd completely forgotten about. Until now, the receiver screen was on, glowing softly, and I realized with a jolt that his office was right next to the nursery. The baby monitor camera pointed at the wall they shared, which meant it had probably been picking up audio from Marcus's office this whole time. My hand was shaking as I picked up the receiver. The screen showed the empty nursery, but the audio indicator was flashing, showing it had recorded something recently. These monitors had a 24-hour recording feature that saved everything to a memory card. I pressed the playback button. At first, there was just silence and the sound of Marcus typing. Then I heard his office door open and a voice I knew almost as well as my own. Marcus's mother, Diane. My stomach dropped like a stone. Diane, and I had what you might call a complicated relationship. From the moment Marcus introduced us 7 years ago, she'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. I was too career-focused, too independent, too Chinese, though she'd never say that part out loud. She'd wanted him to marry Kimberly, his high school sweetheart, a blonde lawyer from a prominent Boston family who went to their country club. When we got engaged anyway, Diane had tried to convince Marcus to get a prenuptial agreement. She told him I was probably after his family's money, even though I made more than he did as a senior software engineer at a tech startup. When we got married without the prenup, she'd barely spoken to me at the wedding. The only thing that had softened her toward me at all was our struggle to conceive. Suddenly, she was invested. calling constantly to ask about our progress, suggesting doctors and treatments, even offering to pay for IVF. I thought maybe we were finally bonding over our shared desire for a grandchild. How naive I'd been. On the recording, I heard Diane's voice clearly now. "Is she gone?" she asked. "Yeah, she just left for her morning run," Marcus replied. "She'll be gone at least an hour." "Good. We need to talk strategy. Your grandmother's lawyer called me this morning. My blood went cold. My grandmother. My Popo. She passed away 2 months ago at 93 years old. I'd been devastated. She'd raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She'd immigrated from Taiwan with nothing and built a successful chain of restaurants across the Bay Area. She taught me Mandarin, taught me to cook, taught me everything that mattered. In her will, she'd left her estate to me. The restaurants, the commercial properties, her house in Pacific Heights. All of it, worth approximately $8 million. It was currently in probate, expected to be finalized within the next 3 months. "What did he say?" Marcus asked on the recording. "The probate should be complete by early November. Once Victoria has access to the inheritance, we move forward with the plan." "Plan? What plan? And you're sure about the timing?" Marcus asked. "I don't want to screw this up." "The timing is perfect," Diane said. "California is a community property state. Once that money hits her accounts, it becomes marital property. You file for divorce immediately before she has time to do anything with it. You'll be entitled to half of everything." I grabbed the edge of Marcus's desk to keep from falling. The room was spinning. They were planning to divorce me, to steal half of Popo's estate, the inheritance she'd left to me, her granddaughter, the child she'd raised. "What about the house?" Marcus asked. "That's community property too," Diane replied. "We bought this townhouse together. She'll have to buy out your half or sell. Either way, you walk away with at least $200,000 from the house alone, plus $4 million from the inheritance." "Jesus," Marcus breathed. $4 million. "And that's just the liquid assets," Diane continued. "If you play this right, if you get a good lawyer, you might be able to argue for more. The restaurants have been appreciating in value. The commercial properties alone are worth millions." "She's going to fight me on this," Marcus said. "Victoria's not stupid." "That's why we need to be strategic," Diane said, and I could hear the calculated coldness in her voice. "You can't give her any reason to suspect. Keep being the loving husband. Keep trying for that baby she wants so desperately. Once the inheritance clears, you tell her you're not happy anymore, that you've grown apart. Make it seem like a mutual decision." "What if she's pregnant by then?" Marcus asked. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, protecting the tiny life growing inside me that they didn't know about yet. "Even better," Diane said, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. "California courts favor the mother, yes, but they also favor co-parenting. You'll get joint custody, which means child support from her to you. And with $4 million, she can afford generous child support." "Mom, I don't know if I can do this," Marcus said, and for a second, hope flared in my chest. Maybe he'd have a conscience. Maybe he'd tell his mother this was wrong. "Marcus!" Diane's voice turned sharp. "How many years have you been living beyond your means? How much debt have you racked up that Victoria doesn't know about?" Silence. "That's what I thought," Diane continued. "Those crypto investments that tanked. The gambling debts. The credit cards. You're in over $200,000 of debt that she has no idea about. This inheritance is the only way you're getting out of that hole. $200,000 of secret debt. My husband, who I trusted with everything, had been lying about everything. Once you're divorced and financially stable," Diane went on, "you can do whatever you want. Maybe even reconnect with Kimberly. She's divorced now, you know. I saw her at the club last week. She asked about you." "Mom," Marcus said, but he didn't sound upset. He sounded interested. "I'm just saying," Diane replied. "You married Victoria when you were young and stupid. You were trying to rebel, to prove to me that you didn't need my approval. But look where it got you. Married to a woman who cares more about her career than you, who can't even give you a child after 3 years of trying. Can't even give you a child." The words were knives. I was 6 weeks pregnant with their grandchild, and they were planning to destroy me. The IVF was expensive, Marcus said. We've spent almost $100,000 on treatments. Money you'll get back, Diane assured him. Plus another $4 million on top of it. Marcus, I know this seems harsh, but I'm your mother. I only want what's best for you. And what's best for you is not spending the rest of your life with a woman who trapped you into marriage and who's going to inherit millions that you helped her earn through 3 years of emotional support during her grandmother's illness. Trapped him, as if I'd done anything except love him completely. You're right, Marcus finally said. You're right. I'll do it. Once the inheritance clears, I'll file. Good boy, Diane said. Now, let's talk about which lawyer you should retain. I've already done some research. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing divorce attorneys, asset division strategies, and how Marcus should start documenting anything that could be used against me in court. How he should start taking screenshots of my work emails to prove I was more invested in my career than our marriage. How he should start keeping a journal documenting our fights, even if he had to exaggerate or invent them. By the time the recording ended with Diane leaving and Marcus returning to his computer, I was sitting on the floor of his office, tears streaming silently down my face, one hand still pressed protectively against my stomach. They were going to take everything. My inheritance, my house, my baby, eventually, through custody battles and child support schemes. They'd planned it all out like a military operation. And they'd been counting on me being too trusting, too naive, too in love to see it coming. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I wiped my tears away and stood up on shaking legs. I walked to Marcus's computer and woke it up. He'd left himself logged in, probably in his hurry to leave. I opened his email and started scrolling. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails to divorce lawyers from 2 months ago, right after Popo died, asking about consultation fees, about California community property law, about the best strategies for maximizing asset division. Emails to his mother discussing the plan in more detail. Timelines, strategies, backup plans, and emails to someone named Kimberly, his ex-girlfriend. Flirtatious emails, photos, plans to meet up. Once this is all settled, he'd been preparing to leave me since the moment my grandmother died. Everything since then, every I love you, every time he'd held me during another failed pregnancy test, every kiss, every moment of intimacy, all of it had been a lie. He'd been playing a role, waiting for the payday. I took screenshots of everything. Every email, every message, every piece of evidence. I saved them to my phone, to a cloud drive, to 3 different email accounts. I wasn't going to make the same mistake they'd made. I wasn't going to underestimate my opponent. Then I did something that would change everything. I took the memory card out of the baby monitor receiver. The card that contained the audio recording of Marcus and Diane's entire conversation. Their complete plan laid out in their own words. And I made copies. 3 copies. 1 for me, 1 for my lawyer, and 1 that I'd hold in reserve for exactly the right moment. Then I went back to the kitchen and continued making beef Wellington like nothing had happened. Marcus came home 2 hours later, all smiles and kisses. "Hey, baby," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Something smells amazing." I let him hold me, even though my skin crawled at his touch. "Making your favorite," I said, keeping my voice light. I wanted to do something special. "What's the occasion?" he asked. I turned in his arms and looked up at him. This man I'd loved for 7 years. This man I'd married, built a life with, tried desperately to have a baby with. This man who was planning to destroy me for money. No occasion, I lied, smiling. Just wanted to remind my husband how much I love him. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. But I said them anyway, because if Marcus could play a role, so could I. If he could pretend to love me while planning my destruction, I could pretend not to know while planning his. We ate dinner together. He praised my cooking, told me stories about his day, asked about mine. We watched TV on the couch, his arm around my shoulders, both of us playing our parts perfectly. When we went to bed that night, Marcus reached for me. And even though everything in me wanted to recoil, to scream, to confront him with everything I knew, I didn't. I let him touch me. I played the loving wife. Because I needed him to believe everything was normal. I needed him to think he was winning. The next morning, I told Marcus I had to go into the office early for a meeting. Instead, I drove straight to a law office downtown. Not just any law office. The best divorce attorney in San Francisco, according to every ranking I'd researched the night before while Marcus slept beside me oblivious. Victoria Chen. No relation, but I liked the synchronicity. She was in her 50s, had a reputation for being ruthless, and had a 98% success rate in high-net-worth divorces. Her consultation fee alone was $5,000, but I didn't care. I'd charge it to a credit card Marcus didn't know about. Margaret's assistant showed me into her corner office with views of the bay. Margaret herself was impeccably dressed, sharp-eyed, and had the energy of a predator. I liked her immediately. "Mrs. Chen," she said, shaking my hand. "What brings you here today?" I sat down and pulled out my phone. "I need to file for divorce," I said. "But first, I need you to listen to something." I played her the audio recording. All 38 minutes of Marcus and Diane's planning session. Margaret's expression went from professional interest to barely contained fury. When it ended, she looked at me with something like respect. "You have this recording legally? It's from a baby monitor in my own house," I confirmed. "Recording common areas of my own property. Completely legal in California. And you have copies. Multiple copies. In multiple locations. Plus screenshots of all his emails discussing the plan." Margaret smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark spotting blood in the water. "Mrs. Chen, I think we're going to get along very well." Over the next 2 hours, Margaret laid out a strategy that was so perfect, so devastatingly complete, that I actually felt sorry for Marcus. Almost. "First," she said, "you don't tell him about the pregnancy. Not yet. That's ammunition we'll save for later. Second, we file for divorce before the inheritance clears probate. We file this week. That way, the inheritance comes to you after the filing date, which means it's separate property. He has no claim to it. Third, we use this recording. Not just in divorce court. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. We're talking about intentional misrepresentation, planned deception with the intent to steal marital assets. This recording proves premeditation. Fourth, we go after his secret debt. $200,000 in undisclosed debt is financial infidelity. In California, that debt becomes his sole responsibility if we can prove he concealed it. And fifth," Margaret said, leaning forward, "we time everything perfectly. We file. We serve him. And we do it in the most public, most humiliating way possible. Because men like your husband, men who think they're clever enough to con their wives, they need to be destroyed publicly. It's not enough to win. We need to annihilate him. I should have felt guilty about what we were planning. I should have felt bad about the calculated destruction we were going to rain down on Marcus and Diane. But I didn't. All I felt was cold, clear certainty. They tried to take everything from me. Now I was going to return the favor. One more thing," I said to Margaret. "I want to send that recording to some people before we file. I want them to know exactly who Marcus and Diane really are." "Who did you have in mind?" Margaret asked. I smiled. "Everyone who matters." That evening, I sat at my computer and created a private YouTube video. Unlisted, so only people with the link could view it. I uploaded the full 38-minute recording from the baby monitor, with clear labels identifying the voices as Marcus Chen and Diane Chen. Then I wrote an email. The subject line read, "You need to know the truth about Marcus and Diane Chen." The body of the email was simple. "To everyone who has ever cared about me, who has ever wondered why my marriage is ending, who has ever been asked to take sides, I want you to hear the truth in their own words." This audio was recorded on a baby monitor in my own home. I was 6 weeks pregnant when I discovered they'd been planning to divorce me the moment I inherited my grandmother's estate. Listen to what they said. Judge for yourselves. "Victoria." I attached the YouTube link. And then I sent it to Marcus's father, who'd always been kind to me, who had no idea what his wife and son were planning. To Marcus's sister, who'd been my friend throughout the marriage. To every single person at the country club, where Diane was a prominent member. To all of Marcus's professional contacts, clients, and colleagues whose emails I'd found in his computer. To his college friends, his fraternity brothers, every person who'd ever attended our wedding. To my coworkers, my friends, my family. To Popo's lawyer, who was handling the estate. And finally, to Kimberly, his ex-girlfriend, with a special note. Thought you should know what Marcus really thinks about women before you get involved with him again. I sent 73 emails in total. To every person who knew us, who knew them, who would care. Then I closed my laptop, walked into the bedroom where Marcus was watching TV, completely oblivious, and I lay down next to him like everything was normal. Long day, he asked, pulling me close. You have no idea, I said. I fell asleep that night with my phone on silent, knowing that by morning, everyone we knew would have listened to that recording. Would know exactly what kind of people Marcus and Diane Chen really were. When I woke up at 6 the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. 347 texts, 192 missed calls. My email inbox had exploded. Marcus's phone was buzzing too. Over and over and over. He woke up groggily and reached for it. I watched his face as he looked at the screen. Watched the color drain away. Watched his eyes go wide with panic. What the fuck? He whispered, scrolling through message after message. I sat up, stretched, looked at him with innocent eyes. What's wrong? He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his face. Victoria, what did you do? Me? I asked. I didn't do anything. Why? What's happening? His phone rang. His mother. He answered, put it on speaker without thinking. Marcus! Diane's voice was shrill with panic. Everyone knows. Everyone has heard it. How did she get that recording? How did she? Marcus's eyes met mine. And in that moment, he knew. He knew I'd been playing him the same way he'd been playing me. You recorded us, he said flatly. I smiled. Actually, you recorded yourselves. In my house. On a baby monitor I legally purchased and installed. Every word you and your mother said about stealing my inheritance, about your secret debt, about planning to divorce me the second Popo's estate cleared. Every single word. Victoria, please, he started. And this morning, I continued, my voice pleasant. Margaret Chen, my divorce attorney, will be filing paperwork with the court. We're serving you at noon today. In your office, in front of all your colleagues, since so many of them have already heard the recording anyway. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice cracked. I already did it, I said. Oh, and one more thing. I'm pregnant. 6 weeks. I found out the day before you and your mother had your little planning session. I was going to surprise you with the news. Instead, I discovered you've been planning to divorce me since my grandmother died. Diane was screaming on the other end of the phone, but I couldn't make out the words anymore. Your grandmother's lawyers have been notified, I continued. The probate judge has been notified. Every email you sent, every plan you made, every step of your conspiracy to commit fraud, it's all documented. Your debt is all yours, Marcus. The house is mine. The inheritance is mine. And our baby will be raised by a mother who actually wanted them, not by a father who saw them as a child support paycheck. I stood up and walked to the door, turned back to look at him one more time. This man I'd loved. This man who betrayed me in the worst possible way. You tried to take everything from me, I said. So I took everything from you first. Seems fair, doesn't it? And then I left. If you're still watching this, I want you to know something important. This story isn't over. What happens next is even better. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens when Marcus and Diane try to fight back. Trust me, the revenge gets so much better. Your support means everything to this channel. By noon that day, the entire city knew what Marcus and Diane had tried to do. The recording had gone viral in our social circles. The country club had launched an investigation into Diane's membership. Marcus's biggest client had terminated their contract, citing moral concerns. And at exactly 12 p.m., a process server walked into Marcus's office building, found him at his desk, and served him with divorce papers in front of a dozen colleagues who'd all heard the recording that morning. He called me 23 times that day. I didn't answer once. Instead, I met with Margaret, and we started building our case. Not just for divorce. For full custody, given his admitted plan to use our child for financial gain. For reimbursement of all marital funds he'd used to cover his secret debt. For the house, for everything. Marcus's father called me that evening. Victoria, he said, his voice heavy with grief. I had no idea. I am so sorry. I know, I said gently. Marcus's father was a good man who'd been married to a monster for 30 years. None of this is your fault. I'm filing for divorce too, he told me. I can't stay married to a woman who would do something like this, who would help her son destroy his wife for money. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be, he replied. You did me a favor. I just wish I'd known sooner what kind of person I was married to. Marcus's sister called next. Through tears, she told me she'd always suspected her mother had toxic tendencies, but she'd never imagined anything like this. The messages kept coming. Friends, family, acquaintances, all expressing shock, horror, support. Every single person who'd heard that recording knew exactly what had almost happened to me. And every single person was on my side. 3 days after the recording went public, Diane showed up at my house. I watched her through the window, this woman who tried to help her son rob me. She looked 10 years older, her face drawn and haggard. I didn't answer the door. She knocked for 10 minutes before finally leaving, shoulders slumped in defeat. A week later, Marcus tried one more time. He sent me an email. Victoria, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, can we talk? Can I at least explain? I wrote back one sentence. The baby monitor explained everything. We have nothing left to say to each other. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Marcus tried to fight, but Margaret crushed him at every turn. Every argument his lawyer made, we countered with evidence from the recording, from his emails, from his secret debt. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd listened to the full recording, looked at Marcus with open disgust during the hearings. Mr. Chen, she said during one particularly heated exchange, you planned to defraud your wife of her inheritance. You concealed $200,000 in debt. You conspired with your mother to commit fraud. The only reason you're not facing criminal charges is because your wife has chosen to be merciful. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue for joint custody, claiming Marcus had a right to be in his child's life. Margaret stood up, calm and devastating. Your Honor, Mr. Chen's own recorded words make it clear he viewed this child not as a blessing, but as a financial asset to be used for child support payments. The recording proves he has no interest in parenting, only in profiting from the child's existence. The judge agreed. I was granted full physical custody. Marcus got supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other weekend. He was ordered to pay child support, yes, but far less than he'd been fantasizing about. And he was ordered to pay my legal fees. All of them. The house was mine. The inheritance, when it cleared probate 2 months later, was mine alone, not a penny of it considered community property because the divorce had been filed before it was finalized. Marcus's secret debt? The judge ruled it was separate debt, incurred without my knowledge, and made it his sole responsibility to repay. When the final judgment came down, Marcus had lost everything. His wife, his child, for all practical purposes, half the house value, which he had to forfeit because he couldn't afford a lawyer good enough to fight me. His reputation, his career, which never recovered from the public humiliation, his relationship with his father and sister, who both sided with me, and Diane. The country club expelled her. Her friends abandoned her. Her husband divorced her, and in that divorce, she lost just as much as Marcus had. They tried to steal $8 million from me. Instead, they'd lost everything they had. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I named her Helen, after my popo. When I held her for the first time, I thought about how close I'd come to letting Marcus and Diane destroy everything Popo had built, everything she'd left for me and for her great-granddaughter. But they hadn't destroyed anything, because I'd fought back, because I'd been smart enough, strong enough, to beat them at their own game. Marcus sees Helen every other weekend for 2 supervised hours. He's not allowed to take her anywhere, not allowed to be alone with her. The supervisor I hired reports that he seems awkward with her, uncertain, like he doesn't know how to be a father. I'm not surprised. He never wanted to be a father. He wanted a paycheck. Diane has never met her granddaughter. I got a restraining order after she showed up at my house 3 times trying to see the baby. She sends cards on Helen's birthday that I throw away unopened. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined I could. I expanded Popo's restaurant chain, opened 2 new locations, Started a scholarship fund in her name for young Asian American women pursuing business degrees. I'm raising Helen in the house Popo would have loved, teaching her Mandarin, teaching her to cook, teaching her everything that matters. Teaching her that family isn't always blood. Teaching her that trust is earned. Teaching her that when someone tries to take everything from you, you have every right to take everything from them first. People ask me if I regret sending that recording to everyone we knew. If I think I went too far, if I should have handled things more privately. I tell them the same thing every time. Marcus and Diane didn't plan to destroy me privately. They planned to do it publicly, legally, completely. They wanted to humiliate me, rob me, take everything I had. All I did was beat them to it. Last month, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. He looked rough, older than his 32 years. Tired, defeated. He saw me with Helen, and his eyes filled with tears. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "She is," I agreed. "Victoria, I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was so stupid, so greedy. I destroyed the best thing in my life." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd almost destroyed me. This man who'd seen me as nothing more than a bank account to be drained. "You're right," I said. "I won't forgive you. But not because I'm angry anymore. I'm not. I'm just indifferent. You're Helen's father by biology, but you're nothing to me. You're just a stranger who once lived in my house." His face crumpled, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Nothing. I walked away with my daughter in my arms, back to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one Marcus tried to burn down. And I've never looked back. Today, Helen is 3 years old. She's brilliant, funny, stubborn as hell. She has Popo's eyes and my determination. She'll never know her father wanted to use her as a bargaining chip. She'll never know her grandmother saw her as nothing but a child support payment. All she'll know is that her mother loved her enough to fight for her before she was even born. That she comes from a line of strong women who built empires from nothing. That when someone tries to take everything from you, you take everything from them first. And that love isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, telling the truth, protecting the people who matter. Marcus and Diane thought they were clever, thought they'd found the perfect con, thought I was too trusting, too naive, too in love to see what they were doing. They forgot one critical thing. I was my grandmother's granddaughter. And my grandmother didn't build an $8 million empire by being naive. She built it by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone who underestimated her. I learned from the best. So here's what I want you to remember. If someone is planning to destroy you, they will always make a mistake. They'll get cocky. They'll get careless. They'll record themselves on a baby monitor planning your destruction while you're supposedly out for a run. And when they make that mistake, you take it and you use it and you destroy them completely. Not because you're cruel, not because you're vengeful, but because you're protecting yourself and everyone who comes after you. Because some people only understand consequences when those consequences cost them everything. Marcus and Diane understand now. And they'll spend the rest of their lives wishing they'd never underestimated me. But let me tell you about what happened in the years after that coffee shop encounter. Because the story doesn't end with me walking away. It ends with me building something so beautiful, so successful, so undeniably mine that every single person who doubted me, who pitied me, who thought my life was ruined, had to eat their words. 6 months after that coffee shop encounter, I received a letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery. The return address was from a law office in Boston I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from Kimberly. Yes, that Kimberly. Marcus's ex-girlfriend, the one Diane had been pushing him toward, the one he'd been emailing while planning to leave me. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in elegant script. "Dear Victoria," it began. "You don't know me, but you saved my life. When you sent me that recording of Marcus and his mother discussing their plan to defraud you, discussing how I was part of their backup plan, how Diane wanted Marcus to reconnect with me once he'd successfully stolen your inheritance, I was horrified. I want you to know that I had no idea about any of it. Marcus had reached out to me a few months before, and foolishly, I'd been responding to his messages. I thought he was just being friendly. I had no idea he was already planning to divorce you, and that his mother was orchestrating everything. That recording showed me exactly what kind of man Marcus had become. More importantly, it showed me what kind of man he'd always been. I realized that when we dated in high school, when he'd seemed so perfect, so devoted, it was all an act even then. He was always just playing whatever role would get him what he wanted. You exposed him, Victoria. And in doing so, you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I'm a lawyer now, as you might have seen from this letterhead. I specialize in divorce law. And after hearing your recording, after seeing how brilliantly you handled your case, I've started focusing specifically on cases like yours. Cases where one spouse has been planning financial fraud against the other. I call them premeditated divorce fraud cases, and I'm building my practice around helping other women like you. Women who've been targeted by spouses who see them as walking ATMs rather than human beings. I've won 6 cases in the past year using strategies inspired by your approach. Evidence gathering, strategic timing, public exposure when warranted. Every time I win one of these cases, I think of you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for showing me and countless other women that we don't have to be victims. We can be victors. With deepest respect and gratitude, Kimberly Morrison, Yescu. I sat in my kitchen, reading that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of something else. Validation. Purpose. The knowledge that my pain had meant something beyond just my own story. I wrote back to Kimberly that same day. We started corresponding, first through letters, then emails, then phone calls. She sent me case files, asked my advice on strategies, told me about the women she was helping. One case in particular stood out. A woman named Jennifer, whose husband had been planning to have her declared mentally incompetent so he could gain control of her family's pharmaceutical fortune. Kimberly had helped Jennifer install security cameras that caught her husband coaching his mistress on what symptoms to report to doctors, how to make Jennifer look unstable. Another case involved a man whose wife had been secretly mortgaging their home to fund her affair partner's business ventures. Kimberly had helped him trace every penny, expose the fraud, and get his wife charged with criminal conspiracy. 6 cases, 6 families saved from the kind of destruction Marcus and Diane had tried to bring to mine. You started something, Kimberly told me during one of our phone calls. Women are coming forward now. They're not ashamed anymore. They're not staying silent. They're fighting back, and they're winning. That conversation planted a seed in my mind, an idea that grew and grew until I couldn't ignore it anymore. 3 months later, I launched a foundation, the Helen Chen Foundation, named after both my daughter and my grandmother. Its mission: to provide legal support, financial assistance, and strategic resources to people facing premeditated divorce fraud. I funded it with $1 million from Popo's inheritance. Money that Marcus had tried to steal. Money that would now go toward helping other people protect themselves from people like Marcus. The foundation offered free consultations with top divorce attorneys, financial forensics experts, and private investigators. We taught people how to gather evidence legally, how to protect their assets, how to document everything. We provided safe houses for people who needed to leave dangerous situations quickly. We offered therapy, career counseling, and financial planning. Within 6 months, we'd helped 43 people. Within a year, that number grew to over 200. One woman wrote to me, "My husband's plan was almost identical to what happened to you. He was waiting for my father's estate to clear probate before filing for divorce. But because I'd heard your story, because the foundation taught me what to look for, I found the evidence. I filed first. I protected everything my father left for me and my children. You saved my family's legacy." Another person shared, "I'm a man whose wife was planning to take everything. Nobody believed me because people think this only happens to women. But your foundation didn't care about gender. You cared about justice. You helped me prove she'd been hiding income, forging my signature on loans, planning to disappear with our kids, and half of everything I'd built. Thank you for fighting for all victims, not just women." The stories kept coming. Hundreds of them. People from all over the country who'd found my story online, who'd read about the foundation, who'd reached out for help. And we helped every single one of them. But not everyone was happy about my success. About a year after I launched the foundation, I started receiving threatening messages. Anonymous emails telling me to shut down the foundation, to stop ruining families, to mind my own business. The messages escalated. Someone slashed my tires. My office received bomb threats that turned out to be hoaxes, but were terrifying nonetheless. Someone spray-painted "Homewrecker" across my garage door. I hired security. For myself, for Helen, for the foundation offices. And I kept going, because I knew what was really happening. Somewhere out there were Marcus and Diane's spouses who'd been planning to defraud their partners and had been caught because their victims had learned from my story, had reached out to my foundation, had fought back. Those people were angry, and they wanted me to stop. But I didn't stop. I doubled down. I went public, did interviews on podcasts, talk shows, news programs. I told my story over and over again. The baby monitor, the recording, the betrayal, the victory. And every time I told it, more people reached out. More victims became survivors. One interview in particular went viral. It was on a major morning show, and the host asked me a question I'd been waiting for someone to ask. Victoria, some people say you went too far. That you shouldn't have sent that recording to everyone Marcus and Diane knew. That you destroyed their reputations unnecessarily. What do you say to that? I looked directly into the camera. I say this. Marcus and Diane planned to destroy me financially, emotionally, and legally. They planned to take everything my grandmother had built, everything she'd left for her great-granddaughter. They didn't plan to do that privately. They planned to do it through the court system, publicly, legally, with lawyers and judges and legal documents. They were going to humiliate me by making me look like the villain who wouldn't share my inheritance with my loving husband. So no, I don't think I went too far. I think I exposed them for exactly what they were before they could destroy me. And I'd do it again. The clip got 15 million views in 3 days. The foundation's website crashed from traffic. We received over 10,000 inquiries for help in 1 week. I had to hire a full staff. Lawyers, investigators, counselors, security. I opened offices in 3 cities. San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles. We couldn't keep up with the demand. And through it all, Helen grew. My beautiful, brilliant daughter who had no idea that her existence had been part of a con, who knew nothing about the darkness that had surrounded her conception. She started preschool at a progressive school in Pacific Heights. On her first day, one of the other mothers approached me in the parking lot. "You're Victoria Chen," she said. Not a question. A statement. I tensed, prepared for confrontation, prepared for judgment. "I just wanted to thank you," she continued, her eyes filling with tears. 3 years ago, I was married to a man who was planning to do exactly what Marcus tried to do to you. I found out because of your foundation. I fought back because he showed me how. And now I'm remarried to someone wonderful, and my kids are safe, and our financial security is protected. You saved us. She hugged me right there in that parking lot, and I hugged her back, both of us crying. That's when I realized something important. My story wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't just about justice. It was about showing other people that they could survive this, that they could fight back, that they could win. During Helen's second year of preschool, something unexpected happened. Marcus's father reached out. Robert Chen had divorced Diane 2 years earlier, right after the recording went public. He'd lost touch with Marcus, disgusted by his son's actions. He'd been living in Florida, trying to rebuild his life away from the wreckage of his family. "Victoria," he said when I agreed to meet him for coffee. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I'd like to meet Helen. Not as her grandfather necessarily, but just to see her once. To know that something good came from this nightmare." I studied him carefully. Robert had always been kind to me during my marriage. He'd been the only member of Marcus's family who'd truly welcomed me, who'd never made me feel less than. "Why now?" I asked. He looked down at his coffee cup. "Because I'm dying. Stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. And I realized I have one grandchild in this world, and I've never met her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was so ashamed of what my wife and son tried to do to you." My heart clenched. "Robert, you didn't do anything wrong." "I raised Marcus," he said quietly. "I was married to Diane for 30 years and never saw what she really was. I failed as a father and as a husband. But I'm praying that maybe I can be something good for Helen before I go. I agreed to let him meet her, under supervision, in my home, with the understanding that this was a one-time meeting unless it went well. Robert brought Helen a stuffed panda bear from FAO Schwartz. He got down on one knee, arthritic and struggling, and introduced himself simply as a friend of Mommy's. Helen, being 3 and fearless, immediately asked him about his mustache, which she found hilarious. Robert laughed, a sound I'd almost forgotten, and they spent an hour reading books together while I watched from the doorway. When it was time for him to leave, Helen hugged him goodbye. "You're nice," she declared. "Will you come back?" Robert looked at me, his eyes wet. "That's up to your mama." I made a decision in that moment. "Thursday afternoons," I said. "If you're feeling up to it, you can visit on Thursdays." For the next 5 months, Robert came every Thursday. He read to Helen, played games with her, taught her card tricks. He never mentioned Marcus, never tried to advocate for his son or make excuses. On his last visit, when he was too weak to get down on the floor to play but still insisted on coming, he gave me an envelope. "Don't open it until after," he said. 2 weeks later, Robert Chen died, peacefully in hospice. At his funeral, which I attended with Helen, I learned that he'd left his entire estate to Helen. Not to Marcus, not to Diane, to the granddaughter he'd known for 5 months. The estate wasn't massive, about $300,000. But the letter he'd left with it, the one he'd given me that last Thursday, made me sob. "Dear Helen," it read, "by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand what happened between your parents. You'll know that your father tried to do something terrible to your mother. You'll know that your grandmother was part of that plan. You'll know that your mother fought back and won. I want you to know something important. Your mother's strength, her intelligence, her courage, these are the things that matter. Not money, not status, not the opinions of people who don't know the whole story. Your mother took something terrible and turned it into something that helps people. She took her pain and used it to prevent other people's pain. That's real strength. That's real character. I'm sorry I wasn't a better father to your dad. I'm sorry I didn't see what my wife was becoming. I'm sorry I didn't protect your mother when she was my daughter-in-law. But I'm not sorry I got to know you. Those Thursday afternoons were the best part of my last months on Earth. Be like your mother, Helen. Be strong. Be smart. Be brave. And never let anyone make you feel like you're worth less than everything. With love, Grandpa Robert." I set up a trust fund for Helen with Robert's inheritance. She'd get it when she turned 25, along with that letter. Meanwhile, the foundation continued to grow. We'd helped over 500 people by Helen's 4th birthday. We'd prevented an estimated $100 million in fraudulent asset transfers. We'd helped put 12 people in prison for conspiracy to commit fraud. And we'd empowered thousands of people to protect themselves, to fight back, to refuse to be victims. One day, I received a call from a woman named Sarah. She was a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell my story and the story of the foundation. "I want to call it The Baby Monitor," she said. "I want to show how one accidental recording started a movement, how you turned your trauma into a mission, how you've changed lives." I agreed with one condition. We'd focus not just on my story, but on the stories of the people we'd helped. The real heroes were the ones who'd found the courage to fight back, who'd protected themselves and their children. The documentary took a year to make. Sarah interviewed dozens of people, foundation clients, lawyers, financial experts, and yes, me. She even tried to interview Marcus, who declined. Diane also refused. When The Baby Monitor premiered at Sundance, it won the Audience Award. When it was released on streaming platforms, it was the #1 documentary for 6 weeks straight. The publicity brought even more attention to the foundation. We received a $5 million grant from a tech billionaire who'd been through his own divorce fraud. We opened offices in 10 more cities. We launched a hotline that operated 24 hours a day. We were helping thousands of people now. Thousands. And through it all, I kept being mom. I took Helen to school every morning, helped with homework every evening, made dinner, gave baths, read bedtime stories, attended ballet recitals and parent-teacher conferences. Helen's supervised visits with Marcus continued like clockwork. Every other weekend, 2 hours, always supervised. The supervisor's reports were heartbreaking in their banality. Father arrived on time. Spent 2 hours with child. Play with toys. Child well behaved. Father seemed distant. Distant. That was the word that kept appearing. Marcus showed up, but he wasn't present. He played with Helen, but he didn't connect with her. He was fulfilling an obligation, not nurturing a relationship. Helen, being a perceptive child, noticed. When she was 5, she asked me one evening at bedtime, "Mama, why doesn't Daddy love me like you do?" My heart broke. "What makes you think he doesn't love you, sweetheart?" "He never smiles," she said simply. "Not real smiles. He looks sad when he sees me. Like I make him sad." I pulled her close. "Baby, that's not about you. That's about choices Daddy made a long time ago. You are perfect and wonderful, and anyone would be lucky to be your parent. If Daddy seems sad, it's because he knows he made mistakes that cost him the chance to really know you." "What mistakes?" she asked. "When you're older, I'll explain everything," I promised. "But for now, just know that you are loved completely. By me, by Popo's memory, by everyone who matters." She seemed satisfied with that answer. But a month later, she told me she didn't want to see Marcus anymore. "It doesn't feel good," she said. "He's like a stranger. It feels weird and uncomfortable." I consulted with her therapist, who'd been seeing her regularly to ensure the divorce and custody situation wasn't traumatizing her. The therapist agreed that if Helen didn't want to continue visits, forcing them could do more harm than good. We went back to court. Helen, now old enough to express her preferences, spoke to the judge privately. I don't know what she said, but when we came back into the courtroom, the judge ruled that visits would only continue if Helen requested them. Marcus looked devastated, but he didn't fight it. Maybe he knew he couldn't. Maybe he knew that he'd done this to himself. Helen never requested another visit. She was 5 years old, and she'd made her choice. Marcus sent birthday cards and Christmas presents, which I gave to Helen. She'd open them, say a polite thank you that I'd relay via email, and then forget about them. The presents weren't thoughtful, generic toys you could buy at any store. The cards were signed simply Dad. No personal message. He was a ghost in her life, present only in the most technical sense. Meanwhile, Diane had completely disappeared. After Robert's funeral, where she'd shown up drunk and been escorted out, I never heard from her again. Marcus's sister told me that Diane had moved to Arizona, was living in a small apartment, working retail. The country club expulsion had destroyed her social life. The divorce had destroyed her financial security. Her son barely spoke to her, blaming her for everything. She got exactly what she deserved. When Helen turned 6, something beautiful happened. I met someone. His name was James Wu. He was a pediatric surgeon at UCSF, brilliant and kind, with a gentle sense of humor. We met at a foundation fundraiser where he donated both his money and his time, offering to provide free medical consultations for foundation clients who needed them. We talked for 3 hours that night, about medicine and technology, about family and loss, about building something meaningful from pain. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. He understood grief. He understood rebuilding. "I admire what you've done," he told me. "Turning your trauma into something that helps thousands of people. That takes remarkable strength." "Or remarkable anger," I said wryly. He laughed. "Maybe both. Maybe that's what strength is. Channeling anger into something productive instead of letting it destroy you." We started dating slowly, carefully. I was hesitant to introduce anyone into Helen's life, protective of her stability. But James was patient. He never pushed, never demanded, just kept showing up, consistent and kind. 6 months into our relationship, I introduced him to Helen. Just as Mama's friend James. They met at a park, neutral territory. James brought a kite, something he knew Helen loved from conversations with me. They flew that kite together for 2 hours. Helen's laughter rang out across the park, pure and joyful. And when James said goodbye, Helen hugged him and asked when she'd see him again. "That's up to your mama," he said, the same words Robert had once used. "Soon, I promised." James and I dated for 2 years before he proposed. He did it at home, with Helen present, because he wanted her to be part of the decision. "Helen," he said, getting down on one knee in front of her first. "I love your mama very much, and I love you very much too. If your mama says yes, I'd like to be your stepdad. Not to replace anyone, but but to be another person who loves you and takes care of you. What do you think? Helen looked at me, then at James, then back at me. Does he make you happy, Mama? He does, I said honestly. Then okay, Helen declared. But I get to be the flower girl. James laughed and cried at the same time. Then he turned to me, pulled out a ring, and asked the question he'd waited 2 years to ask. I said yes. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Popo's old house in Pacific Heights, which I'd kept as a family home. Helen was indeed the flower girl, wearing a white dress with red embroidery that matched my own dress. Marcus was not invited. Diane was not invited. This celebration was for the family I'd chosen, not the family that had tried to destroy me. Margaret Chen, my divorce attorney who'd become a dear friend, officiated the ceremony. Kimberly flew in from Boston to attend. The foundation staff was there. James's family, who'd welcomed me with open arms. My chosen family, all of them. When James and I exchanged vows, I looked out at the assembled group and felt overwhelming gratitude. Not just for James, though I loved him deeply, but for everyone who'd stood by me, who'd helped me build this life from the ashes of my old one. In my vows, I said, James, you came into my life when I thought I'd never trust again. You showed me that not everyone lies. Not everyone has ulterior motives. Some people are exactly who they appear to be, good, honest, kind. You've loved not just me, but my daughter. You've supported not just my personal life, but my mission. You see me completely, including the parts that are angry and hurt and scarred, and you love me anyway. I promise to love you with that. Same completeness. To show up every day. To choose you every day. To build a life with you that's based on truth and trust and genuine partnership. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Our honeymoon was spent not on some tropical island, but volunteering at a foundation office in Los Angeles, where we helped train new staff and met with clients. That's the kind of man James was. He understood that the foundation wasn't just my job. It was my calling. 2 years into our marriage, James and I had a daughter together. We named her Rose after James's late wife, with his blessing and encouragement. Rose and Helen bonded instantly. Helen, now 10, took her role as big sister seriously, reading to Rose, helping with bottles, being involved in every aspect of her care. Watching Helen with Rose, I thought about Marcus missing all of this. Missing watching Helen grow into this capable, compassionate young woman. Missing the chance to see her with her baby sister. Missing everything because of choices he'd made when she was still just 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Around this time, I got an unexpected call from Marcus's sister, Emily. Victoria, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice heavy. Marcus tried to kill himself last week. My stomach dropped. What? He's okay now. Physically. He took pills, but his roommate found him in time. He's in psychiatric care. She paused. I thought you should know. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just thought you should know. I sat down heavily. What happened? Why did he? He's been spiraling for years, Emily said quietly. After the divorce, after losing his career, after Helen stopped seeing him. He never recovered. He's been drinking, can't hold down a job. He's got nothing left, Victoria. And I think he finally realized it's all his own fault. That letter he left, it was full of regret. About what he did to you. About losing Helen. About throwing away his entire life for money he never even got. I felt nothing. No satisfaction at his suffering. No guilt that my actions had contributed to his downfall. Just nothing. I'm sorry he's in pain, I said carefully. But Emily, he tried to destroy me. He tried to steal everything my grandmother left for me and Helen. If he's suffering now, it's because of choices he made. I can feel compassion for him as a human being, but I won't feel responsible for consequences he brought on himself. I know, Emily said. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know. And to tell you that I'm proud of you. For everything you've built. For the life you've made. For the woman you've become. After that call, I sat with James and talked through my complicated feelings. Guilt that I didn't feel guiltier. Relief that I felt nothing. Sadness that a human being was in such pain, even one who'd hurt me terribly. You're allowed to feel nothing, James said gently. You're allowed to have moved on so completely that his suffering doesn't affect you anymore. That's not cruelty. That's healing. Marcus recovered from his suicide attempt. I heard through Emily that he went through intensive therapy, got sober, was trying to rebuild some kind of life. I was glad for that. Not for him, exactly, but for the general principle that people should get help when they need it. But I never reached out, never sent a message of support. Our connection was severed completely, and I had no desire to reconnect it. When Helen turned 13, she asked me to tell her the whole story. She'd pieced together bits and pieces over the years, overheard conversations, internet searches, the documentary she'd watched without telling me. So I sat her down, James beside me for support, and I told her everything. The baby monitor, the recording, the plan to steal her inheritance, the cold, calculated betrayal, my response, the divorce, everything. Helen listened quietly, her face serious. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I'm glad you fought back," she finally said. "I'm glad you didn't let them take everything from us." "Are you angry?" I asked. "About your father? About what I did to him?" She shook her head. "I'm sad that he's my biological father. But James is my real dad. James is the one who showed up. James is the one who loves me. Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Actions do. Out of the mouths of babes. Or in this case, out of the mouth of my wise, perceptive teenager." Shortly after that conversation, Helen asked if James could adopt her. If she could change her last name from Chen to Wu, erasing the last connection to Marcus. Marcus had to consent to the adoption. When my lawyer reached out to him, I expected a fight. Expected him to refuse out of spite or some last grasp at connection. Instead, he signed the papers immediately. His lawyer sent a note with the signed documents. "Mr. Chen wants you to know he thinks this is the right decision. He hopes Helen will have a good life." The adoption was finalized on Helen's 14th birthday. That night, we had a small celebration. Just family. Helen blew out candles on her cake, and when I asked what she wished for, she said, "I don't need to wish for anything. I already have everything I want." James cried. I cried. Even baby Rose, now 3, seemed to sense something important was happening. The foundation continued to thrive. By Helen's 15th birthday, we'd helped over 10,000 people. We'd expanded internationally, opening offices in London, Toronto, and Sydney. The documentary had been translated into 12 languages. We'd inspired copycat organizations, which I welcomed. The more groups fighting premeditated divorce fraud, the better. This wasn't about ego or credit. It was about helping as many people as possible. One case we handled stood out. A woman named Patricia had discovered her husband's plan to have her committed to a psychiatric facility so he could gain power of attorney and control her family's real estate empire. The plan was intricate, involving a corrupt doctor who was willing to falsify diagnoses. Patricia had planted recording devices throughout her house, similar to what I'd done. She captured everything. Her husband and the doctor discussing medications that would make her seem unstable. Her husband researching committal laws. Her husband practicing the concerned husband routine he'd used with the commitment board. We helped Patricia not only divorce her husband but press criminal charges. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud and illegal confinement. He's currently serving 7 years in federal prison. After that case made headlines, I received a letter from Diane. It was the first communication I'd had from her in over a decade. The envelope had an Arizona postmark and was addressed in shaky handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Victoria," it read, "I know I have no right to contact you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm dying. Liver failure from decades of drinking. The doctors say I have maybe 2 months. I'm writing to you not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but to tell you something I should have said 10 years ago. You were right. About everything. Marcus and I were wrong. We were greedy and cruel, and we tried to destroy you for money. I've spent the last 10 years living with what I did. Living in a small apartment, working retail jobs, completely alone because everyone who knew what I did abandoned me. And I deserved all of it. I thought I was clever. I thought I was protecting my son. Instead, I destroyed him. I destroyed myself. And I caused you unimaginable pain. Patricia's case was in the news yesterday. I read about it, about how you helped her, how your foundation saved her. And I realized something. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that helps thousands of people. You took our cruelty and betrayal and used it to fuel something beautiful and meaningful. I took my son's desperation and used it to fuel a crime. You're everything I should have been and wasn't. You're the kind of woman I should have raised Marcus to value and respect, not destroy. I'm writing this from a hospice in Phoenix. I'm alone. Marcus hasn't visited or called in 3 years. I have no friends, no community, nothing. And that's exactly what I deserve. I don't expect you to read this letter. I don't expect you to care that I'm dying. I just needed to tell you, before I go, that you were right. You were always right. And I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. I'm sorry. It means nothing coming from me, but I'm sorry. Diane Chen. I read the letter 3 times. Then I showed it to James. Do you want to respond? He asked gently. I thought about it for a long time. Thought about Diane lying in a hospice bed, alone, dying, consumed by regret. No, I finally said. I don't need to respond. She said what she needed to say. I don't need to absolve her or make her feel better about dying. She made choices. She's living and dying with the consequences. That's not my responsibility. James nodded. For what it's worth, I think that's healthy. You don't owe her peace of mind. 2 weeks later, I got a notification from Marcus. Diane had died. The funeral would be in Arizona. No one was expected to attend. I didn't go. I didn't send flowers. I didn't send a card. I acknowledged the information and moved on with my life. Marcus's sister, Emily, attended the funeral. She told me later that it was just her, Marcus, and the funeral home staff. No friends. No extended family. Nothing. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen, Emily said. Mom died completely alone, and it was entirely her own fault. I felt a pang of sadness for that. Not for Diane specifically, but for any human being dying alone and unloved. But that sadness didn't come with guilt. I hadn't caused Diane's isolation. Her own actions had. Helen was 16 when she started volunteering at the foundation. She'd come to the office after school, help with filing, sit in on consultations, with client permission, and learn about the work. One day, she sat in on a meeting with a woman whose situation was remarkably similar to mine. Husband planning to divorce her after inheritance, mother-in-law involved in the scheme, pregnancy involved. After the meeting, Helen came to my office with tears in her eyes. Mom, she said, that could have been us. If you hadn't found that recording, if you hadn't fought back, that woman's story could have been our story. I know, I said gently. You saved us, she said. And now you're saving her. And thousands of others. You're a hero, Mom. I pulled her into a hug. I'm not a hero, sweetie. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. That's what makes you a hero, she insisted. That conversation stuck with me. I'd never thought of myself as a hero. I'd thought of myself as a survivor. As someone angry enough and smart enough to fight back. But maybe Helen was right. Maybe heroism isn't about being fearless. Maybe it's about being afraid and hurt and betrayed, and fighting anyway. When Helen graduated from high school, she gave a speech as class valedictorian. In it, she talked about family, not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. I could have had a father who saw me as a financial asset, she said. Instead, I have a dad who chose to love me, who showed up every single day, who taught me what real fatherhood looks like. I could have had a grandmother who saw me as a means to an end. Instead, I have the memory of a great-grandmother who built an empire and left me the tools to build my own. I could have had a mother who stayed silent about betrayal, who let herself be destroyed for the sake of keeping peace. Instead, I have a mother who fought back, who protected us, who turned her pain into purpose. Family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other, every single day, even when it's hard. The audience gave her a standing ovation. I cried through the entire speech. Helen was accepted to Stanford, my alma mater. She planned to study law, hoping to eventually work for the foundation. I want to help people like us, she told me. I want to be the kind of lawyer who fights for people who are being betrayed by the people who should love them. She was my daughter in every way that mattered. Not because we shared DNA, though we did, but because she'd learned from watching me that justice matters, that fighting back is okay, that protection yourself and your children is not only acceptable but necessary. On Helen's first day of college, as James and I drove back from dropping her off, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I'd done it. I'd raised a strong, compassionate, intelligent daughter. I'd built a foundation that had helped tens of thousands of people. I'd remarried someone honest and kind. I'd created a life that was so full, so meaningful, so rich that the woman I'd been 10 years ago, the one crying on the bathroom floor with a positive pregnancy test, about to discover her husband's ultimate betrayal, wouldn't even recognize it. Marcus and Diane had tried to take everything from me. Instead, they'd inadvertently given me the fuel to build something bigger and better than anything I'd had before. That's the thing about betrayal. It can destroy you, but it can also forge you into something harder, sharper, stronger. It can be the catalyst for becoming a version of yourself you never knew existed. 5 years after Helen started college, the foundation celebrated its 15th anniversary. We'd helped over 50,000 people by then. 50,000 families saved from the kind of destruction Marcus and Diane had planned for mine. At the anniversary gala, I gave a speech to a room full of donors, staff, clients, and supporters. 15 years ago, I said, I was a woman who just discovered that my husband and his mother were planning to defraud me of my inheritance. I was 6 weeks pregnant, devastated, and had no idea what to do. But I had one thing going for me. I'd accidentally recorded their entire plan on a baby monitor. That recording saved my life. It saved my daughter's inheritance. It saved our future. But it did more than that. It showed me that evidence matters, that documentation matters, that fighting back is not only okay but necessary. So I started this foundation with a simple mission: help other people fight back before they're destroyed. Teach them to gather evidence. Teach them to protect themselves. Teach them that they don't have to be victims. Today, we've helped 50,000 people. 50,000 individuals and families who were targeted by spouses who saw them as assets to be liquidated rather than people to be loved. We've prevented over $2 billion in fraudulent asset transfers. We've helped secure custody for thousands of children who would have been used as pawns. We've inspired legislation in 12 states that makes premeditated divorce fraud a crime. But more than any statistic, more than any dollar amount, what I'm proudest of is this: we've shown people they're not alone. That this happens, that it's not their fault, and that they can survive it. They can fight back. They can win. And they can take their pain and turn it into something that helps others. That's what I did. That's what thousands of our clients have done. And that's what we'll keep doing for as long as this work is needed. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After the gala, I went home to James and Rose. Helen was home from law school for the weekend. We all sat together in the living room of the house Popo had left me, the house Marcus had tried to take, and I felt complete. "Mom," Helen said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that, sweetie?" "I want to find Marcus. Talk to him. Not to reconnect, but to understand. To see who he is now, 15 years after everything happened." My stomach clenched. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I need to. I need to look at him as an adult and decide for myself what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have. Right now, he's just this absence in my life. This question mark. I want to turn him into a period. A complete thought. An answer question." I looked at James, who nodded supportively. "It's her decision." "Okay," I said to Helen. "But I want you to be careful. Don't go alone. Don't let him manipulate you." "I won't," she promised. "I'm your daughter. I'm not easily manipulated." She was right about that. Helen found Marcus working as a manager at a hardware store in Sacramento. He'd rebuilt a small life for himself. Sober, in therapy, living in a modest apartment. Still alone, but functional. She called him and asked to meet. He agreed immediately, his voice shaking with emotion, according to what Helen told me later. They met at a neutral coffee shop. Helen recorded the conversation on her phone. She was my daughter, after all, with Marcus's permission. She played me the recording later that night. "Why did you do it?" Helen asked him in the recording. "Why did you try to steal from Mom?" Marcus's voice was heavy with regret. "I was drowning in debt. I'd made terrible financial decisions. Gambling, bad investments. I was desperate. And my mother, she convinced me that your mom's inheritance was the solution. That I deserved it because I'd supported her through her grandmother's illness. It was wrong. It was all wrong. But I was weak and desperate, and I listened to her. Did you ever love Mom? Helen asked. A long pause. Then I did. At the beginning. But somewhere along the way, I started seeing her as a means to an end. A way to solve my problems. And that's not love. That's use. Your mother deserved so much better than me. Why didn't you fight for me? Helen asked, and I could hear the pain in her voice. After the divorce, why did you just let me go? Because, Marcus said, and his voice broke, I knew I had nothing to offer you. I wasn't a good father. I wasn't a good man. You were better off without me. And I was right. Look at you now. Strong, smart, in law school. You got everything from your mother and nothing from me. That's how it should be. Do you regret what you did? Helen asked. Every single day, Marcus said. I lost everything. My wife, my daughter, my career, my family. I lost it all because I was greedy and stupid, and I listened to my mother instead of my conscience. I deserve to lose it all, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Helen asked him more questions. About Diane, about his life now, about whether he'd ever considered fighting the adoption. I signed those papers immediately, Marcus said, because it was the right thing to do. James is your father. He earned that title. I'm just the man whose genetics you share. That's all I deserve to be. The recording ended with Helen saying goodbye. They shook hands. Marcus asked if he could contact her occasionally, and Helen said she'd think about it. When Helen played me the recording, I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me was glad Marcus had grown, had recognized what he'd done wrong. Part of me still felt nothing but contempt for him. What are you going to do? I asked Helen. I'm going to move forward, she said. I'll probably let him send an occasional email. Nothing more. He's not my dad. He's just someone in my past who I've made peace with. That felt right. Life continued. Helen finished law school and joined the foundation as a staff attorney. James performed surgeries that saved children's lives. Rose grew into a spunky, brilliant 8-year-old who wanted to be a doctor like her dad. And me. I kept running the foundation, kept fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, kept telling my story so others would know they could survive their stories too. 15 years after that terrible day when I discovered Marcus's betrayal, I'd built something beautiful. Not despite the betrayal, but because of it. I'd taken the worst moment of my life and used it as fuel for something meaningful. That's what I want you to know if you're going through something similar. If you've discovered that someone you loved has betrayed you, has planned to destroy you, has seen you as nothing more than a resource to be extracted, you can survive this. You can fight back. You can win. And you can take your pain and turn it into something that helps others. You don't have to forgive. You don't have to reconcile. You don't have to make peace with people who try to destroy you. You just have to protect yourself, gather your evidence, and refuse to be a victim. That's what I did. That's what thousands of foundation clients have done. And that's what you can do too. Marcus and Diane thought they were smarter than me. Thought they'd get away with it. Thought I'd never find out until it was too late. They were wrong. And now, 15 years later, I have everything. A loving husband, 2 beautiful daughters, a foundation that's changed thousands of lives, peace, purpose, joy. And Marcus, he has a job at a hardware store, a small apartment, and occasional emails from a daughter who's polite but distant. And Diane, she's dead and was buried by 3 people. Justice isn't always immediate, but it's always inevitable. The baby monitor that accidentally recorded their plan didn't just save my inheritance. It saved my life. It saved Helen's future. And it started a movement that saved 50,000 other people. All because I refused to be a victim. All because I fought back. All because I believed I deserved better than what they tried to give me. You deserve better too. Remember that. And if you need help fighting back, if you need resources or support, or just someone who understands what you're going through, reach out. To my foundation or organizations like it. To lawyers who specialize in this. To friends and family who believe you. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And you can survive this. I promise. Because I did it. And so can you. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story gave you the justice you needed to see, check out the other videos on screen. They're just as satisfying. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? See you in the next story.